Hey guys, tonight we slip back into a realm of coal dust and mist where you wake beneath heavy blankets in a frigid bedroom and the first breath you draw carries hints of cinder and aged fabric. You blink at a thin band of light creeping past the edge of dense drapes, and somewhere beyond, a wagon rumbles across stone pavement while a distant tower bell coaxes everyone from their slumber. The floorboards will be freezing, the water will be icier still, and your clothing has more layers than your personal insecurities. At multiple moments, you'll likely think truthfully you wouldn't last an entire week in this routine without pleading for modern heating and flexible pants. So before you settle in, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I create here. Share in the comments where you're tuning in from and what hour it is there right now so we can picture this ancient misty dawn spreading across your town too. Now lower the lights, perhaps turn on a fan for that gentle background noise, and let us slide into tonight's experience together. You open your eyes to a ceiling that's just slightly discoloured from decades of coal dust seeping into the plaster, cracked in several spots like a chart of narrow streams. The flame in the small bedroom hearth has died during the night, so the atmosphere nips at your nose when you shift. Your breath clouds before you as you push aside the covers and sense that initial shock of chill on your skin. For an instant you contemplate remaining in bed indefinitely, then recall that in Victorian England there's no such thing as a relaxed blanket day. Your feet locate the carpet beside the bed, a threadbare but determined island of warmth in a universe of frozen wooden planks. You slide into soft, somewhat drooping slippers and grab the robe hanging from a peg. The material is dense but rough, and it carries faint traces of soap, coal, and the perfumed pouches someone placed in the closet months earlier. Beyond the window, you hear wheels clatter by, and the clip of a horse, and you realise the milkman is already outside making his rounds while you're still attempting to persuade your body to function. You walk to the washstand, where a decorated porcelain bowl sits beside a jug of water left from the previous evening. The water isn't hot, not even lukewarm. You tip a bit into the bowl, dip your fingertips and flinch as the cold travels straight up your arms. There's no rapid shower, just a swift splash to face, throat, arms, and the nape of your neck. The sort of wake-up that seems more like discipline than personal care for a slight hint of indulgence. There could be a fragment of scented soap, something with lavender or lemon, a subtle reminder that someone somewhere thinks mornings can be enjoyable. On a small seat nearby, someone has arranged your chemise, stockings, and stays. You step out of your nightdress and into the chemise, the linen chilly but soon heating against your body. The stockings follow next, secured with garters that always appear to rest slightly too snug or slightly too slack, never precisely correct. You understand that somewhere in the future people will create elastic, and honestly, you hope they'll speed up. As you settle, you might hear a chime ring distantly from below, a notification for servants if your residence is grand enough, or just the clatter of cookware if it isn't. Then arrives the corset. It waits, pale and stern, whalebone or steel, giving it that rigid, unyielding form that guarantees proper posture and zero hunching. You wind it around yourself, sensing the stiff material close over your ribs and begin securing the front. If you're fortunate, someone assists you with the rear laces, pulling them in with measured tugs while you grip the bedpost and breathe out. As the laces constrict, your waist diminishes, your ribs object, and your breathing turns shallow and controlled. Historians continue to debate whether women genuinely swooned constantly from corsets, or if novels and illustrations overstated it, but you can verify right now that bending forward swiftly isn't going to happen. Once it's secured, you stand slightly taller, There's an odd reassurance in the framework, a sensation of being held together, even if that position is moderately uncomfortable underneath. Your chemise bunches in several persistent creases, and you understand those ridges will irritate you all day like a label left in a fresh garment. On goes a petticoat, then another, swishing quietly as they settle around your legs. The heaviness accumulates, not overwhelming but persistent, transforming every motion into a mild push through layers of fabric. A standard fact drifts into your thoughts that during Queen Victoria's rule from 1837 to 1901, women's fashion for much of the era demands this kind of structured outline for decency. You don't get to select comfort as your primary style concern. At the vanity table, a small looking glass reflects a somewhat dishevelled face, flushed from cold water and exertion. Your hair requires attention. Next, you sit while skilled fingers yours or a maid's comb through knots. Combs and brushes snag strands, which you might cautiously preserve later in a little container or vessel. That's an unusual custom of the period, by the way, when people occasionally keep their own hair to fill little cushions called hair rats, so you can expand fashionable hairstyles or even weave it into emotional jewellery. It sounds unsettling from a contemporary perspective, but to you, it seems ordinary, like saving old ticket stubs. You secure your hair up, twist and wrap it into a knot or plaits, taming flyaways with a touch of pomade. A white cotton bonnet or a plain ribbon might complete it, depending on your social standing and the time. Married women in many households keep their hair concealed indoors, a mark of propriety and structure. You inspect the mirror one final time, not exactly seeking beauty, more pursuing tidiness. Loose strands suggest carelessness, and carelessness isn't on the endorsed catalogue of feminine qualities. From the hallway comes the scent of coal smoke, intensifying as someone manages the fires, and the softer aroma of something cooking, perhaps bread toasting or oatmeal underway. You sense your stomach respond with a small, optimistic rumble. Before you descend, you pull on your dress bodice fitted over your corset, sleeves tailored or gathered, depending on the fashion of the year. Small buttons march along the rear or front, each one a minor trial of endurance. Somewhere a tiny voice questions if zippers will become reality someday and how many hours of existence that would preserve. That tiny voice is accurate and somewhat resentful. By the time you fasten the final ribbon and smooth the skirt, the room appears different. The unmade bed is arranged, the washstand organised, the fire nursed back to existence. If you're supposed to manage it, light has climbed slightly higher on the curtains, transforming the fog outside a gentler grey. Your body feels restricted and vertical, dressed not just in material but in obligations. You've washed, secured, wrapped, pinned and buttoned yourself into the character this morning demands. Your day hasn't officially started yet. You're already somewhat exhausted, a bit famished, and keenly conscious that even something as basic as getting dressed is a complete operation. You move out into the hallway and the atmosphere smells different. A blend of coal smoke, drying garments, beeswax polish, and the faint suggestion of cabbage from someone's previous meal. The floorboards groan as you advance, and beneath your feet the house is already conscious in strata you don't witness. A bell on the wall produces a small metallic shiver as someone yanks a cord from another chamber. It's like an advance warning system that announces breakfast. Responsibilities are assembling. If you reside in a comfortable home, you understand that an entire crew of women has been awake long before you, navigating through the grey half-light. Domestic work is the single largest employer of women in Victorian England, and you're walking above one of the century's biggest concealed workplaces. In the gap between your footsteps and the level below, you can nearly sense the burden of early waking sore palms and the tension never to miss a signal. Somewhere a maid rushes to answer that bell because delay means difficulty. You move towards the stairway, the buffed railing cool and sleek beneath your fingers. As you go down, you pass the series of small bell pulls, each with a subtle drawing room, morning room, master's bedroom, nursery. At first sight, it appears delightful, like decorations, but it's actually a command centre that governs other people's existence. A servant's attention is always partly tuned to that faint jingle, the way contemporary people keep partly focused on their devices, anticipating the next request. One system buzzes, the other chimes. Same fundamental concept. In the lower passage, the atmosphere becomes warmer and dustier. The faint, scratchy noise you hear is a housemaid with a bundle of twigs and cloth, dusting along baseboards before the family comes downstairs. She operates swiftly because time is limited and expectations are broad. She's already ignited fires, cleared chamber pots, and beaten out carpets in the courtyard, where the neighbours can assess method as well as marks. Historians continue to debate whether these duties are genuinely embraced with satisfaction or simply tolerated because other choices for women are so restricted. Either way, the pattern of her day is bound to tasks that cycle endlessly. You trace the faint rattle of metal and dishes toward the rear of the house. The kitchen is the power centre, and it already seems as if midday has occurred there multiple times. The cook, typically a woman with substantial shoulders and a practical expression, stands at the large work table, sleeves pushed up. Before her are eggs, flour, and a substantial mixing bowl for mixture. Because breakfast is more than a simple bowl of cereal. It might be oatmeal, toast, smoked fish, bacon, or rolls, and each item demands focus. One eye is on the range, the other on the entrance, where a junior maid might rush in with some emergency involving soot or milk. Near the kitchen stove, the coal flame glows crimson, releasing waves of warmth that make your cheeks flush and your spine tingle. The iron vessels blacken with soot and fat, and a large kettle rests permanently at the side, simmering softly, always prepared to supply hot water. A container of coal waits close by, its jagged edges and black powder revealing the account of someone's early morning journey to the basement. A peculiar little detail exists by the fireplace. Sometimes, to prevent coal dust from dispersing, families use ornamental metal shields or special coverings, only displayed when company is anticipated, its beauty applied like cosmetics to a deeply sooty issue. Further along you spot a scullery maid at the basin, sleeves damp and fingers crimson from cold water and strong soap. She cleans pans that weigh nearly as much as she does, arranging them in precise towers. The faucet isn't always contemporary plumbing. In many residences, she hauls water by the pail from a pump in the courtyard. You observe her move with the kind of effectiveness that emerges from knowing she'll never truly be done. She'll only be disrupted by another bell. It's a position that conditions you to exist in the midst of tasks, never at the completion. If your station in this house is elevated, you might only graze the boundaries of this realm. You might come down to the breakfast chamber and discover everything already arranged, cloth pristine, silverware gleaming, tea steaming in the vessel. The passage from raw materials to this orderly table is invisible. You notice an egg, not the hen, the cook, the coal, the cleaned pan, the scullery maid's raw knuckles. There's a sort of deception at work, a sleight of hand built on early mornings and uncompensated overtime. You receive the dish, acknowledge your maid, and continue on, and the machinery hums along beneath you. If your existence sits downstairs in an apron, the reality is different. You exist by the timepiece, but not really your own. You share a cramped bedroom with another maid, so your day starts when she nudges your shoulder in the darkness. Your initial thoughts are about which flame to ignite, which chamber to straighten, whose temperament to sidestep. You know that if you're too sluggish, your name may be mentioned in a measured voice. At the dining table later, it might not be yelled, which somehow feels harsher, like displeasure steeped in cold tea. You observe the unspoken rankings among the staff. The cook possesses authority, especially over the younger maids, because food is crucial and errors are evident. A lady's maid, if the household is wealthy enough to employ one, operates in a separate sphere, nearer to the mistress and her confidences. A parlour maid might have marginally cleaner hands, handling guests and buffed surfaces, while the scullery maid manages the messy turmoil. Each position has an invisible marker of status that everyone in the rear quarters can interpret instantly. To an outsider, it might all appear identical, apron and cap, but inside the framework, it's as stratified as your petticoats. Out in the courtyard, you discover more activity. The kitchen entrance opens onto a narrow strip of cobblestones where deliveries land. Milk, bread, coal, maybe meat, all bringing more labour with every arrival. Chickens might peck around if space permits, earning their keep with eggs and the occasional dispute. A stable at the distant end of the courtyard shelters a horse or two if the family can manage it, and the aroma of hay, manure, and leather drifts through the air. This small outdoor realm belongs mostly to the servants, a space to breathe slightly freer even while hauling buckets. You see how details flow differently down here. Rumours pass between housemaids, cooks, coachmen and merchants faster than any correspondence. Who's visiting, who's disputing, who's secretly betrothed. All of it spreads through the backdoor channels. It's like a news feed, except it operates on murmurs and shared tasks. Some of that intelligence is pure amusement. Some of it is protection, because understanding a master's patterns or a mistress's vulnerabilities can shield you from their harshest dispositions. At some moment, you notice how youthful many of the servants are. Teenage girls depart rural settlements and packed city lanes to labour in these houses, dispatching wages home. If they're fortunate, their prospects might include marriage, a small business, or more years in service. Historians continue to debate whether this existence should be interpreted mostly as mistreatment or as a scarce gateway to food, shelter, and a degree of autonomy. To the girl scrubbing the floor, it may seem like both simultaneously, depending on the day and the house. You stand for an instant halfway between front and rear, between polished corridor and hot kitchen. The entire structure vibrates with female toil, even when it appears tranquil on the exterior. Every coal bucket, every folded napkin, every spotless window relies on women whose names will never surface in magnificent histories. You hear another bell chime in the distance, a small metallic tone that conveys a complete sentence. Someone desires something and a woman will deliver it. You enter the breakfast chamber and the atmosphere feels as deliberately organised as the china on the table. Light glides around heavy drapes in pale bands, landing on glass, polished silver, and the small wisps of steam ascending from teapots and covered platters. Chairs stand in their customary positions, each one quietly claimed by routine. It all appears casual at first glance, but underneath the stillness, you can sense regulations humming, orderly and invisible. If you sit as the lady of the house, your seat gives you the optimal reach to the tea, and coffee pouring is officially a courtesy and unofficially a dominance display. You determine who receives what, how rapidly cups are replenished, and whether anyone must request twice. In a realm that maintains a respectable woman belongs in the private domain, this table is one of your command panels. You don't get to cast ballots in elections, but you absolutely regulate how much sugar particular people receive, which is its own form of leverage. If someone irritates you, you cannot dispute politics with them, but you can unintentionally neglect to offer them a second cup. Family members filter in, pursuing their own small orbits. A husband arrives with rustling newspaper in hand, eyes already reviewing headlines about the economy, colonies, and the newest scandal in Parliament. Older children surface carrying textbooks, attempting to balance Latin verbs with jam on toast. Younger ones enter under the watch of a nurse or governess, who stands just behind them, both present and simple to disregard. The servants have already prepared and transported everything here, but you orchestrate the show. Once everyone settles around the table, movement follows rhythms. You pause for the head of the household to sit before you handle your food. You maintain your voice, mild. If you're a young, unmarried woman, you're not meant to command the dialogue. You're anticipated to listen, acknowledge, and offer brief, pleasant remarks that demonstrate interest without sounding too assertive. It's an unofficial training program in how to interpret expressions, how to insert a complimentary comment at precisely the correct instant, and how to conceal tedium behind a pleasant demeanour. Words begin flowing with the tea. Updates about cousins, neighbours, and people spotted in church fills the gaps between clinks of utensils. A cousin's engagement, a friend's cryptic journey to the seaside for her nerves, a neighbour's fresh carriage that may or may not be financed all drift across the table. You store away details because you understand that someday you might need to recall who is generous, who is cheap, who is kind, and who kept everyone waiting on a rainy day. At the same time, you're cautious. One reckless statement can attach to your reputation longer than the smell of smoked fish. The outside realm seeps into the chamber through print. Newspapers and letters bring accounts from distant places, from industrial cities, from railways slicing up the countryside, from edges of the empire you'll probably never witness. A straightforward historical truth is that by the middle of the 19th century, literacy has expanded widely through the middle classes, which means more and more women can read those accounts for themselves rather than waiting to have them read aloud. Historians continue to debate whether women regarded these reports as faint background static or quietly incorporated them into serious private views. Whether you concur with your husband's perspectives or quietly develop your own, the breakfast table transforms into an information centre as well as a meal. Sometimes dialogue takes a side path into stranger territory. Someone references a spiritualist who conducts seances in an elegant drawing room, or a physician promoting a tonic guaranteed to remedy everything from headaches to heartbreak. A peculiar little detail from this realm surfaces on the table itself in the form of small figurines shaped like pigs or birds that fit over soft-boiled eggs to keep them warm, and transforming your breakfast into a parade of miniature disguised volcanoes. People who maintain they are very serious still treasure these bits of absurdity, the same way contemporary adults solemnly collect novelty mugs. It's reassuring to realise that even in a rigid age, people still appreciate silly objects with absolutely no practical function. In smaller, less prosperous homes, the particulars shift, but the rhythm echoes. A narrow table might stand in a cramped chamber above a shop. The china might be damaged and unmatched coal smoke might seep in around the window frame. Yet there's still commitment. A mother smooths the single good cloth, arranges bread as carefully as if it were on silver, and reserves the largest serving for the children. If relatives or paying lodgers sit with you, dialogue doubles as connections. A relaxed chat about someone's employer could be the gateway to a future position. While all of this progresses, the quiet mechanism of service keeps revolving. A maid glides in with additional hot water, exchanges a dish, or removes a plate with the kind of inconspicuous timing that requires years to master. She moves like a stagehand who must never be part of the performance, only the reason the performance functions. You catch her gaze briefly and see the narrative of an early start and a lengthy catalogue of tasks still waiting. Your ease is literally in her hands, even if custom says you both pretend not to acknowledge. Eventually, chairs scrape gently back and people stand. Napkins are folded and abandoned in their positions. The newspaper travels with its reader toward the study. Children disperse to lessons and schools. The chamber that seemed like the hub of the universe for a brief period becomes a work zone again, the table cleared and wiped, the dishes stacked for washing, the fire managed for whatever follows next. You depart with your stomach satisfied and your mind racing, aware that you've just participated in one of the daily shows where Victorian women practice charm, caution, humour, and quiet calculation, all before the clock strikes 10. You open a door and step into a separate domain, one that smells like hot soap, moist fabric, and a bit of anguish. It's wash day. The words alone feel burdensome, your arms tense just considering it. In many Victorian homes, especially in towns and settlements, wash day typically falls early in the week, often on Monday, and everyone understands it's not a day for surprise visitors, unless they appreciate steam and disorder. The laundry area might be a scullery, a small addition built off the rear of the house, or a section of the courtyard with a big tub resting on wooden brackets. Wherever it is, it's jammed with equipment. You see a massive metal or wooden wash tub, a sturdy stick or dolly to beat the clothes, a washboard with grooves like a miniature corrugated roof, and buckets arranged like soldiers who realise they won't survive this conflict. The atmosphere is thick and confined, warm from boiling water and the constant heaving of fabric. You begin by heating water, not a small pan, not a quick kettle, but gallons. You feed coal or wood into the copper boiler, sensing the burst of heat on your face as the fire awakens. The copper pot moans and mutters as cold water slowly approaches boiling. It can require an hour or more just to obtain enough hot water for a proper wash, and you haven't even examined a single sheet yet. Historians continue to debate whether Victorian women devoted most of their domestic hours on laundry, or if other chores consumed even more time. Standing here with steam already stinging your eyes, you would gladly vote for laundry as the primary time bandit. While the water heats, you sort the mountain. Whites, colours, delicate items, heavy things. Everything has its own destiny. You stack shirts, petticoats, drawers, stockings, tablecloths and sheets into piles that threaten to collapse. There's that one shirt with a puzzling stain that everyone pretends not to see. There are socks so rigid you're reasonably sure they could stand on their own and walk to the tub. You inspect pockets because if someone has abandoned a coin or a pencil or a truly dreadful twist, a dead mouse, you're the one who will uncover it in the worst conceivable way. Soap arrives in blocks, not convenient bottles. You shave it into flakes or crumble it with red fingers. The smell is pungent and somewhat medicinal. Sometimes carbolic soap leaves a bitter trace in the air that makes you think of hospitals and disinfectant rather than comfortable laundry advertisements for whites. You recall to prepare something extra, like bluing, a peculiar detail hiding in a small cloth pouch of blue dye surfaces as you swish it through the water to combat yellowing. The challenge is not to exaggerate it unless you prefer your shirts radiating faintly like supernatural activity. Once the copper sings with heat, you pour water into the tub and begin the genuine labour. Clothes enter with soap and maybe some soda crystals that sting your knuckles. You roll up your sleeves and seize the dolly or the long wooden stick. Then you plunge and pound, twisting and forcing water through the fabric muscles in your shoulders. Protest instantly. There's no gym membership that matches this. You work each piece until you're certain both dirt and your desire to exist have loosened slightly. Occasionally you attempt to brighten the moment by pretending the laundry is a villain from a penny dreadful and you're conducting heroic combat. Sadly, the laundry typically wins. Some stains demand special treatments. Old techniques include soaking items in what people politely call chamber lye, which is a refined phrase for stale urine saved from chamber pots because it contains ammonia. It sounds disgusting, and it is, but it also removes grease and dirt. You attempt not to breathe through your nose while handling that phase. It's a comfort to return to plain soap and hot water afterward, which reveals just how drastically your standards have adjusted. When items are scrubbed, you turn to the washboard. You slap a shirt against the ridged surface and rub, 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 pushing foam into the weave of the cloth. Your back bends, your hands burn, and every drop of water that splashes seems to target directly for your face. A standard fact runs through your mind that in cities some women earn their living as professional laundresses, accepting baskets from wealthier households and doing this all day, every day for meagre pay and aching bones. Standing here, you attempt to envision handling not just your own family's clothes but half the streets as well. It feels like a punishment devised by someone who despises fabric. Rinsing follows next. You hoist each heavy dripping piece out of the suds, water cascading down your arms and saturating your apron, and plunge it into clean water. Hoist, plunge, wring. You twist cloth as firmly as you can, attempting to squeeze out every drop. Your fingers cramp, but if you're sloppy, the garments will require forever to dry and might sour with a musty smell. Historians continue to debate whether Victorian homes were genuinely as fragrant and fresh as some nostalgic writers propose, or whether everyday existence mostly smelled like damp cloth, coal smoke and aspiration for large households. Some fortunate or unfortunate soul operates the mangle, a brutal machine of two heavy rollers turned by a crank. You feed in sheets and tablecloths, carefully folding the edges so nothing bunches. As you turn the handle, the fabric squeezes between the rollers and water rushes out in streams. The mangle creaks and groans, and you sense every resistance through the handle. It's remarkable how something so simple can feel so much like wrestling with a stubborn mechanical cow. Drying is its own operation. On a pleasant day, you transport baskets of wet clothes into the courtyard or to a drying green, if you're fortunate enough to have access. Lines stretch between posts, and you peg items one by one. The sky is your tumble dryer, and if it suddenly chooses to rain, you'll contemplate composing very impolite poetry about the weather. In crowded city lanes, people occasionally string lines across alleys so that visitors are welcomed by a festive parade of undergarments flapping overhead. It's both practical and slightly amusing. On damp or cold days, drying shifts indoors. Lines are strung across kitchens and sculleries, transforming every passage into a maze of dripping cloth. The heat from the range attempts to combat the extra moisture and typically loses, so everything feels clammy. You duck under shirts, weave around petticoats, and hope nothing drips down the back of your neck. You might hang items on wooden frames near the fire, pulling them nearer or farther away so they don't scorch. Occasionally someone gets distracted and a sock sacrifices itself to the flames in a miniature puff of tragedy. Ironing waits at the conclusion. Like a boss level in a game on a solid table, you arrange heavy, flat irons, heating on a stand near the fire. There's no helpful temperature indicator, so you test them by hovering your hand near the surface or touching them briefly to a remnant of cloth. If it hisses too fiercely, you wait. If it feels dull, back it goes to reheat. You press collars, cuffs, pinafores and shirts with steady strokes, lifting and placing the weight again and again. Your wrists begin to feel like they're made of old rope. By the time you complete it, the floor is splashed, your clothes are damp, and your hair has escaped its pins. The room smells of soap and steam and a hint of scorched cotton. Clean garments hang or lie folded in stacks, innocent and crisp, as if they've always appeared that way and didn't just attempt to drown you. Somewhere upstairs, someone will pull on a fresh shirt or lay down on smooth sheets and feel quietly satisfied with the comfort of it. They might not consider much about how it arrived in that condition. You, rubbing your aching shoulders, know precisely what it cost in time and energy. You also understand that the entire cycle waits patiently to begin again soon, like a relentless tide of cloth. You step into the parlour, and the room appears like it's been deliberately organised to pretend that nothing challenging ever occurs here. The fire glows politely, not too smoky, not too low. Chairs stand at just the proper angles, neither too rigid nor too slouchy. A few ferns sit in pots near the window, fronds curling as if they're quietly assessing everyone. If you're a respectable middle-class woman, this room is your platform, and your responsibility is to make it appear as though the house maintains itself with the force of your gentle presence alone. The phrase everyone whispers about, sometimes admiringly and sometimes with a sigh, is the concept of the domestic angel. In the mid-19th century, a very enthusiastic poet called Coventry Patmore publishes a lengthy work that praises the perfect wife as pure, patient, and endlessly self-sacrificing. That ideal circulates through magazines, sermons, and advice books until people speak as though a good woman practically glides from room to room in a cloud of moral perfume. Historians continue to debate whether this ideal grants women a quiet kind of authority inside the home or whether it simply confines them with lace and gilt. Standing here with a to-do list longer than your skirt, you're inclined to vote for the second option. On paper, you don't labour. In reality, you manage a compact domestic empire. A household like this may have one or two servants, often a maid of all work, who accomplishes everything from scrubbing floors to hauling coal. You need to understand what she's doing, where the money is travelling, and how the house appears. But you must accomplish it all in a manner that never appears like sweating. You sit at a small table with a writing box. Open your account book and examine the numbers. Food, coal, candles or gas, servants, wages, laundry costs, small repairs, charity donations all march across the page. You sharpen a pencil carefully and attempt not to consider how many bonnets you could purchase if coal would just stop being so demanding. Every bill arrives folded and slightly smug. The butcher, the baker, the coal merchant, the grocer all dispatch little reminders that money owes them a visit. You verify quantities, remember what was actually delivered, and sometimes quietly question whether the butcher exchanged your best cuts for something a bit tougher when he thought no one observed. A standard fact settles in your mind that the 19th century witnesses an enormous expansion in the middle classes, especially in towns, and with it an explosion of shops and services like these. Your household is part of that economic network, and you sit at its hub juggling shillings instead of stock shares. When you're not squinting at numbers, you supervise the appearance of this room. You select where the framed photographs stand, which ornaments sit on the mantelpiece, and which magazines remain casually on display. There might be a glass dome covering a carefully arranged spray of artificial flowers or a stuffed bird, because nothing says comfortable quite like a silent robin staring at everyone from behind glass. A peculiar detail surfaces in the shape of fern fever, a genuine craze that sweeps through respectable homes. People collect ferns, press them in albums, and display them everywhere, in the conviction that they're healthy, tasteful, and wonderfully modern. You water these green celebrities and rotate their pots just so, because you realise visitors will glance at them and quietly add points for fashion. Soft furnishings become your subtle armour antimacassars, those crochet or lace coverings for the backs of chairs, protect upholstery from men's hair oils and also showcase your needlework skills. You drape them carefully, smoothing each one until it falls in a perfect little flourish. Cushions, table runners, and embroidered mats all carry traces of your labour. Yet the polite narrative is that you merely dabble in fancy work to pass the time. Because you have nothing serious to accomplish, you tuck that thought away while your fingers prickle from hours of stitching by lamplight. Managing people requires just as much labour as managing objects. You listen for footsteps in the corridor and assess whether a maid is late with the tea tray or whether a child's shoes sound suspiciously muddy. When the maid enters with a cloth over her arm and a tray rattling slightly, you acknowledge her calmly, however many times you already reminded her about polishing the spoons. You need her to respect you, but you cannot yell like a drill sergeant, at least not if the neighbours might hear. The performance depends on steady control with a gentle smile, not angry stomping. The bell system is part of your toolkit. You ring for assistance when fires need tending, when visitors arrive, or when the coal scuttle has reached that alarming phase where you can see the bottom. Yet every ring feels like a miniature test. Call too rarely, and the household becomes ragged around the edges. Call too often and you risk being discussed as demanding. Behind your back, the boundary between kind mistress and unreasonable tyrant is as thin as the china cups laid out for tea. Sometimes your parlour transforms into an office for invisible tasks. You unfold letters from relatives requesting advice, money, or updates. You respond to invitations, accept some and decline others, always in neatly phrased sentences that reveal exactly how close or distant you feel to the sender. You decide which tradesmen to continue employing and which ones to dismiss politely so that your husband can sign the final letter while you silently accomplish the emotional groundwork. Historians continue to debate whether this kind of behind-the-scenes labour should count as power or simply unpaid bureaucracy. Afternoons may bring visits from friends or acquaintances before they arrive. You cross the room, inspecting everything. No hosiery improperly placed, no textbooks tossed onto seating, no loose animal hair visible on the prized lace headrest. You adjust the window blind's angle so the illumination softens faces, yet conceals any dust motes. The moment the first rap sounds at the entry, you smooth your dress, settle back in your armchair, and assume the posture of one who has been quietly absorbed in reading for hours, rather than sprinting between rooms. With the clockwork reliability of a domestic pigeon, tea arrives, a ritual you manage with the silent authority of a commanding officer. You instinctively know which cups resist chipping, which cookies provide the illusion of abundance without emptying the pantry, and the exact amount of small talk to intersperse between offers of milk and sugar. Beneath the polite exchanges, you are concurrently collecting intelligence about other homes, other habits, and other routines. You overhear which families cook just quit, which child is causing trouble, whose spouse is supposedly bad with funds. These facts might prove essential later when you need to hire new staff or schedule a meeting with precisely the right contact. Even when the parlour is vacant for a spell, your mind remains occupied. You plan upcoming meals, remembering who dislikes garlic and who feigns illness at the slightest offence. You assess if the floor covering can last another season, or if it is time to propose a replacement, a discussion that will involve budgeting, negotiation, and careful persuasion. You consider the small causes you support, perhaps a neighbourhood soup kitchen or a group that stitches clothing for the impoverished, and how much you can donate without compromising your own family's financial stability. From the outside, the scene is tranquil. A woman sits in a pleasant space with some sewing, a volume, perhaps a flower arrangement. To an uninterested bystander, she might seem nearly inactive, an ornament as decorative as her antimacassars and potted plants. You understand the truth. Within that calm exterior, decisions are being made constantly. Finances, provisions, furnishings, employees, social calls, charity lists all flow through your consciousness. You are expected to be a figure of grace, yet you function more like a silent administrator, managing the small realm extending from the kitchen entrance to the front porch, ensuring the entire fragile arrangement does not falter too noticeably. When reality calls, you push open the front door and the street assaults you with crisp air, wagon noises, and the rhythmic beat of footwear. All around, women move with clear direction. Some carry packages or lunch boxes, some guide younger siblings, some walk alone with that specific quickness that signals they are already running late. Proper advice manuals prefer to imagine every woman floating through her receiving room all day. The sidewalk before you argues the point loudly. You join the pace of a group moving toward the industrial sector. Brick buildings rise in long stretches, high windows coated in filth, smokestacks releasing steady plumes of smog. A whistle blows, sharp enough to tighten your jaw, and the movement around you accelerates. You flow with the crowd through the gates and into the weaving mill, where the noise hits like a physical blow. Machinery shrieks and pounds, chains clank, belts thump, and conversations become mere gestures on others' faces. Inside, the air is hot and thick with fine lint from cotton or wool. It sticks to your skin and works its way into your lungs. You wrap a scarf around your head and sleeves around your wrists, trying to stop loose cloth from being pulled into the hungry mechanisms. A historical note buzzes in your memory that by the mid-19th century, textile mills employ vast numbers of women and young girls in areas like Lancashire and Yorkshire, manufacturing everything from plain cloth to elaborate fabrics. You are inexpensive labour, quick fingers and exhausted eyes combined in one neat bundle. You take your position at a spinning frame or a loom. Your task might be mending snapped threads, swapping out spools, or monitoring the warp and weft as materials steadily unroll. The labour is monotonous, yet it demands vigilance. Look away too long and something breaks, snags, or tangles, and the foreman appears with a look that could sour milk. You move in a small area, muscles adapting to a pattern that will be yours for 10 or 12 hours. Somewhere far away, you imagine a fitness instructor calling this conscious rest. You're not amused. Breaks are brief. You eat quickly, perched on a box or a pile of material, fingers still smelling faintly of grease and cleaning solution. Chatter winds its way around you as some girls laugh too loudly in their few spare minutes, telling jokes about management, customers, and the condition of their shoes. Others sit quietly, tallying their pay in their minds and deducting funds for rent, food, perhaps money sent back home. Scholars continue to debate whether this kind of paid work truly grants women independence or merely confines them to long days for minimal wages with new obligations. Sitting here with aching shoulders and your own earnings in your pocket, you feel the pull of both sides. Outside the factory world, a different type of working woman straightens her cap and checks her image in a storefront window. You step into her existence next, as a sales clerk in an elegant department store. Your shifts are long, but the environment is polished. You stand behind counters laden with trims, gloves, fragrances, or hats, trained to be subtly invisible until a buyer needs you, and instantly gracious the moment she does. You learn to arrange your face into a pleasant expression, even when someone has just spent 20 minutes asking to see every possible tint of blue and then bought nothing at all. Your body performs its own feat of endurance. You stand virtually all day because sitting is seen as slothful and unprofessional. Your feet pound inside boots that look charming at 8 in the morning and feel like torture devices by 6 in the evening. You live in fear of yawning in front of a supervisor, dropping anything breakable, or being caught leaning against the counter. The wages are better than some factory jobs, and the setting is cleaner, but the position comes with rigid standards of conduct. A mild flirtation with the wrong man, or gossip about your personal life can result in dismissal. The window displays may project glamorous fantasies, but behind the counters, reality is strictly about precision and carriage. Higher up the social scale, another type of working woman adjusts her cuffs over ink-stained wrists. You adopt the role of clerk, telegraph operator, or typist in a late-century office. The machine sits on the desk like a blunt little creature, keys waiting for your touch. You transcribe dictation, duplicate correspondence, and maintain ledgers, your script tidy and flawlessly readable. Offices begin employing women for these roles because they accept lower salaries and are thought to be naturally dedicated. It is not exactly a sign of respect, but it is an opportunity. There is a strange satisfaction in handling documents that cross states and continents, even if you never put your own name at the bottom. In a quieter, more private residence, another person arranges a collection of school books. You slip into her place too, the governess. She is a working professional wrapped in proper etiquette and simple dresses, neither family nor employee, stuck in the middle where no one quite knows how to treat her. She instructs in reading, writing, geography, French, drawing, music, all the skills considered necessary for children who may one day need to appear polished in their own drawing rooms. She eats alone, walks alone, and is expected to be endlessly patient with students who sometimes test boundaries in ways their parents never observe. The governess position may appear refined, but it is often isolating. You know that your employment can vanish if the family moves, if the children are sent away to school, or if money gets tight and your paycheck suddenly seems unnecessary. Historians still debate whether the governess signifies progress for educated women or a heartbreaking professional dead end. She uses her knowledge every day, but rarely for her own advancement. You gaze at the world map on the wall and silently dream of travelling somewhere that is not the nursery. On another lane, in a cramped upper room that smells of starch and worn-out hopes, you become a seamstress or dressmaker. Cloth piles in every corner, patterns lie tacked to tables, and needles find their way into every inch of your skirt. You spend hours hunched over stitches so fine they nearly vanish, creating garments for other women's formal occasions. a peculiar detail sneaks in with you. In some clothing workshops, labourers earn their name as sweaters, not because they wear heavy shirts, but because the rooms are so hot and the shifts are so long that they literally perspire over every seam. Eventually, the term transfers from the worker to the clothing itself. You look at a contemporary hooded shirt in your imagination with a fresh appreciation. Sewing is a familiar proficiency for many women, but here it becomes a source of income. You piece together small payments from clients, constantly balancing speed and artistry. Eyes ache in poor light, particularly in winter when the daylight seems to disappear. At 4 in the afternoon you may share the space with other women, talking softly as hands move almost independently. Someone cracks a joke about marrying a wealthy client and never having to sew again, and everyone chuckles just long enough to make the idea sting a little less. Across all these professional settings there is a common element you can perceive. Whether in a factory, shop, schoolroom, office or sewing studio, your effort keeps the economy active. Trains transport textiles you helped create, correspondence you copied, clothing you assembled. Shops shine because you stand within them. Businessmen rely on the silent precision of your labour far more than they publicly acknowledge. Officially, the era may define itself as a man's world. In reality, its mechanisms operate because women spend extended days doing work that involves sore feet, tired vision, and a firmly earned feeling that the coins in their pockets belong to them, no matter how small the total. You stand in your dressing area, confronting the wardrobe like a riddle that occasionally fights back. Today requires formal attire, not merely a functional dress for tasks. Perhaps there is a gathering, a polite call, or tickets to a concert. Whatever the reason, your body is about to become a project site for one of the most complex outfits ever designed. You draw a breath that you already suspect your corset will regret. On the chair is the initial layer, a clean undershirt that feels airy and harmless. Beside it, arranged with a certain quiet threat, lies a more structured corset than the one you wear for ordinary days. This one is slightly longer, a bit firmer, with extra support and carefully positioned boning to shape your torso into the accepted silhouette. A simple historical note surfaces as you look at it. Throughout the 19th century, corsets are not simply high fashion, but everyday foundation. For countless women across Europe and North America, sold by the hundreds of thousands. This is not a peculiar addition. This is clothing architecture. You fasten the front closure, hook by hook, the metal cool against your fingertips. Then comes the lacing. If you have a helper or sister, you brace yourself while she pulls the cords through the back, tightening in small steps. If you lace yourself, you tug the strings around in front, using every trick you know. The purpose is not to crush your ribs, despite what the fashion drawings might suggest. The purpose is a smooth contour that fits the top of your gown. You feel your waist contract, your lungs adapt, and your posture straighten, whether it likes it or not. Somewhere, a remarkably positive magazine has called this support. Your ribs file an objection. Once the corset is securely in place, the next layer waits in the corner like a patient skeleton. The cage crinoline, a frame of metal or whalebone hoops suspended from tapes, promises to hold your skirt out in a wide bell shape. Before these frames became common in the 1850s, women used multiple heavy underskirts to achieve that fullness, turning every flight of stairs into a personal exercise session. The crinoline, despite its visual oddity, is actually a practical improvement, trading pounds of fabric for lighter hoops. Scholars continue to argue whether women adopted this change primarily for comfort or mainly because style offered them no respectable alternative. You are inclined to believe both. You step into the cage, raising it carefully so you do not trip on the circling hoops. The structure settles around your legs, making you feel instantly bigger and strangely empty inside. Walking without practice becomes an awkward performance, every turn wider than you anticipate. You fasten the waist closure and watch the rings sway gently, as though you are standing inside a polite small planet with its own orbital path. The floor, once easily reached, now seems somewhere far below your sightline. Over the cage goes the first petticoat, usually simple and strong, smoothing the outlines of the hoops. Then another, perhaps in a finer material or with a decorative hem that only the laundry staff will truly notice. Some women add a coloured underskirt that nobody outside the house will ever see, a small act of defiance in blue or pink beneath all that required white. You might smile to yourself at the idea that under the solemn surface, your outfit holds a secret celebration. The main skirt is ready, a cascade of material that looks far more elegant now that you understand what it takes to support it. Someone has spent hours cutting and joining panels, aligning patterns, adding ruffles or folds. You gather it carefully, find the opening, and step inside. The waistband fastens snugly at your back, hooks and eyes lined up like tiny sentries. When you let the skirt fall, it spills around the crinoline in a wide circle, rustling softly. Turning too fast could probably upset a small table. You practice a slow rotation, like a celestial body, choosing a different axis at the bodice. Fashion performs its most intricate labour. You lift it gently, slide your arms into the sleeves, and feel the cloth settle over your tightly laced torso. A lady's maid, if you are fortunate enough to employ one, moves behind you, securing yet another row of fasteners. The fit is precise, seams shaped to your ribs and waist by someone who measured you while you tried not to cough. A curious detail rests at your collar or cuffs in the form of removable collars and undersleeves called engagiantes that can be swapped out and cleaned separately. It is the era's solution to not wanting to wash an entire garment every time you spill broth. Accessories now appear. Stockings are already on, but you check your bands. Boots with a dozen tiny buttons or hooks wait for your feet, their pointed toes and narrow shape making your toes reconsider their life path. A button hook is likely your most valuable tool here, sliding through those minuscule buttonholes faster than your own fingers ever could. You pull gloves over your hands, smoothing the leather or kidskin, feeling instantly more refined and slightly less capable of retrieving anything from the floor. Jewellery follows. A carefully selected pin at the throat, a chain draped across the chest. Perhaps a locket containing a curl of hair from a loved one inside. You might adjust a timepiece on a ribbon around your neck or tucked into a waist-level pocket, one of the rare concessions to utility. Hair ribbons, decorative combs, or a small hat complete the look. Each piece adds seconds, then minutes, transforming the simple concept of getting dressed into an event that could easily rival a community board meeting. You take a few strides and feel the attire react. The corset keeps your spine erect, the crinoline sways with each step. The skirt follows after you with a slight delay, as though it needs a moment to decide if it agrees with your direction. Sitting requires planning. You back up toward a seat, gather the front of your skirt slightly and lower yourself carefully, letting the hoops tip just enough to prevent flinging the whole thing into your face. Once seated, you perch near the front edge because leaning back too far risks being enveloped by your own outfit. Like the laundry, all of this preparation relies on other people's labour as well as your own. Dressmakers cut patterns, seamstresses join seams by hand or on pedal-operated machines in long rows. Laundresses boil and scrub the removable parts. Shop workers sell the ribbon you just spent 10 minutes tying into a bow. A simple fact whispers behind the seams that the 19th century fashion industry already operates on global commerce, with cotton from distant lands, dyes from chemical plants, and trims imported from specialized centers. Your ensemble is not just individual style, it is a wearable map of trade. Some outfits conceal stranger dangers. Stories circulate of women carrying tiny folding blades hidden in pockets so they can cut themselves free if their crinolines catch fire from an open fireplace or snag on a carriage step. Hoop skirts have been known to trap women in doorways, knock over lamps, and even sweep small children off their feet. If everyone stands too close, you quietly practice a sideways maneuver through your bedroom door, just in case. Fashion is beautiful, yes, but it also acts a little like a poorly trained animal. At last, you look into the mirror. The person staring back at you appears composed, elegant, and flawlessly put together. No one seeing this final image will see the dampness at your hairline, the faint red marks where the corset edges press, or the way your shoulders already feel fatigued from maintaining such careful posture. They will see smooth cloth, graceful lines, and the accepted ideal of female presentation. You know that beneath the surface, your body has just finished a full endurance trial simply to earn the right to step into public space. Without comment, you smooth an imaginary wrinkle from your skirt and move toward the door, trying not to contemplate the reality that you will have to undo every single step before you can truly breathe again. You smooth the fingers of your gloves and look down at the small container in your hand. It could almost be a tiny jewellery box, but inside there is something far more powerful in this specific social context. Calling cards. Each small piece of sturdy paper carries your name in elegant script and, even more significantly, your place in society. If your script looks neat and your card is substantial enough, you are a respectable person. If not, well, you hope your personality is unusually captivating. On the entry table rests a neat pile of other people's cards, sometimes organised in a special dish with delicate little dividers. They tell a story without using a single verb. You can see who has visited, how recently, how often, and even how formally, based on whether the card corners are folded or left sharp. A historical fact nudges your memory that by the mid-19th century, in many European and North American cities, this ritual of making calls with cards is practically a second language among the respectable classes. You do not simply drop by to say hello, you execute a social maneuver with paper and ink. You step out onto the street feeling the reassuring weight of the card case in your pocket. The outing is neither exactly leisure nor strictly business, but rather a form of relationship maintenance. Visiting hours usually occur in the afternoon, a narrow time slot when a respectable woman can appear at someone's residence without causing confusion or offence. Before that, people are presumed to be occupied with domestic duties. After that, they are preparing for dinner or recovering from having survived it. As you walk, you mentally review your itinerary. Some houses require a call because they have recently visited you, others because someone has gotten engaged, had a child, or arrived in the area. A few because keeping up the connection could be advantageous in the future. You are keenly aware that your presence at someone's tea table can influence whether your brother finds employment, your cousin secures a spouse, or your charitable initiative receives contributions. Scholars still debate whether women genuinely enjoy these social calling rituals or feel trapped by them. Like diligent postal workers, you may look forward to some parts of the task and dread the rest, depending on the recipient's house you approach. At the first address, you hand your personal card to a member of the staff who opens the door. The servant checks the name, decides if the visit aligns with the day's rules for callers, and then heads upstairs to ask if the mistress of the residence is available. Sometimes the response, "not at home," is perfectly accurate. Other times, it is a coded message meaning absolutely do not let that person inside. Today you stand waiting in a cold entryway, trying to look past the collection of umbrellas stored in tins that belong to frequent guests. If the servant admits you, you proceed into a reception room that has been meticulously prepared. Chairs are arranged precisely, cushions have been fluffed. A table holds a floral arrangement, and maybe a bowl of fresh fruit that may or may not be touched. Your host stands to receive you, offering a greeting with a smile calibrated to the appropriate degree of pleasure. Once you're seated, she skillfully introduces a subject that proves she paid attention to your last communication or visit. She might inquire about your mother's well-being, mention your brother's academic results, or recall that charming hat you wore to a recent concert. You reply in turn, exchanging small talk, courtesies, and tiny bits of private news. Similar to two collectors swapping rare items, tea soon arrives. Naturally, you know exactly how to manage this social ritual. You accept just enough pastry to show gratitude but avoid appearing greedy, and enough sugar to suggest refinement, not excessive desire. As you drink, your gaze subtly scans the room. New wall coverings, a slight wear pattern on the rug, a recent portrait on the mantelpiece, all convey details about the family's wealth, style, and values. You would never utter an impolite word, but your mind definitely registers that her decorative plant looks less vigorous than yours. The calling card ritual is capable of remarkable subtlety. A corner folded on a card can signify that the visit is one of congratulations, sympathy, or saying goodbye. Leaving a pair of cards at a home shared by a husband and wife can signal your desire to maintain an association with both partners. In certain circles, people even use specialized metallic trays inscribed with signs like "at home" or "not at home." A curious historical note is the practice of some families keeping old cards as keepsakes, arranging them in albums like a human version of trading cards. They form a rare social record of which contacts were important enough to leave their mark on paper. Your next social call is to a house that pushes the bounds of acceptability. The people are respectable, but just barely, with their income hovering precariously. You select an outfit that is slightly less formal, preferring not to appear as though you are flaunting wealth. When the door opens, you observe a mix of nervous pride on the hostess's face. She has presented her finest tableware, perhaps even borrowing a spare serving dish from a neighbour. Her display tray holds cards from people who could offer future social or professional assistance, and your card will become one more support for that fragile structure. Conversation here carries a sharper edge. People discuss who is advancing and who is declining, which sons show promise, and which daughters might be nearing the dreaded designation of on the shelf. You share news of public events, musical performances, and sermons, which also function as coded updates about who is spending money on cultural pursuits and who is being frugal. Beneath the surface, you sense the quiet anxiety that falling out of this visiting rotation could lead to a social descent that impacts every family member. Another house presents a different kind of curiosity. The woman you are calling upon is considered slightly unconventional. She reads academic texts, entertains touring intellectuals, and occasionally expresses opinions about women's education that cause discomfort among certain members of the clergy. You appreciate your visits here because the discussion moves past predictable topics like whose plum cake was too dry at last week's function. While hot tea steams in fine china, she might discuss a recently published novel or an adventurous travel memoir detailing women summiting peaks or exploring distant lands. Historians continue to debate whether these visiting parlours quietly fostered the beginnings of feminist thought or mainly reinforced conventional expectations beneath a superficial layer of advanced ideas. Sitting in her reception room, you understand how easily a question about literature can transition into a question about rights. Not every visit results in a lengthy conversation. Sometimes, if you suspect the person is not receiving visitors but you still need to acknowledge your social obligation, you simply leave your card and depart. This card-dropping technique lets you connect with a broad range of people in a single afternoon without having to hold conversations with every one of them. It is the 19th century equivalent of approving someone's online post without needing to leave a comment. Simultaneously, you pay close attention to which cards ultimately appear in the tray in your own hall and which ones are slipped into a drawer. Those trays are small public exhibitions of affection, required duty, and social ambition. As your series of visits concludes, your facial muscles feel slightly strained from sustained polite smiling, and your voice has adopted a smooth, measured delivery from repeating the same pleasantries and trivial remarks. You have offered congratulations without betraying envy, sympathy without appearing inquisitive, and interest without letting flattery turn into gossip. You slide your remaining cards back into their holder and walk home, aware that within this society you have just spent several hours managing the invisible bonds that connect status, favours, and prospects. You hear it first, before seeing anything. The quick sound of little feet running along a corridor, a high-pitched cry that could signal fun or disaster, and the definite noise of something made of wood hitting something delicate. You take a calming breath, straighten your sleeves, and remind yourself that managing Victorian children is essentially a full-time diplomatic mission fueled by fruit preserves. If you reside in a wealthy home, there is a small separate world upstairs that many adults seldom enter. The nursery is situated at the top or back of the house, a world filled with playthings, miniature furniture, and surfaces that feel perpetually tacky. You climb the stairs and feel the difference in the air, warmer from constant motion, carrying the mixed scents of milk, graphite, soap, and a faint underlying odour of something that likely escaped a diaper. Your primary partner in this domain is the nurse or nanny, typically just called nurse. She is the manager of this childhood realm. She knows which child eats well, who bites, and who hides vegetables inside the teapot when unsupervised. Her clothing is sturdy, her apron well worn, and her arms are strong enough to lift resisting toddlers, though tired enough to wish they would simply climb into bed on their own for once. A simple fact of history here is that many middle and upper-class Victorian families relied on this nursery staff to handle daily child rearing, allowing parents to see their children mainly during designated, supervised visits. You enter the nursery and a baby is almost immediately placed into your arms. The child stares at you with enormous eyes, then makes a grab for your hair with alarming precision. You tilt your head just enough to save a handful of your curls, but keep smiling because you are expected to be the gentle, warm figure, not the woman who nearly lost a chunk of her hairstyle. On a low surface, wooden toys, metal soldiers, dolls, and storybooks create a complicated landscape of potential trouble. Nursery furnishings blend practicality with curious touches. A long, low rocker for infants sits near the hearth, engraved with flower designs that babies completely ignore. A stroller waits by the window, large, wheeled, and somewhat intimidating, like a small carriage with its own strong will. You inspect the belts and wraps, conscious that a park outing later is as much about displaying the children as it is about getting them fresh air. An unusual detail catches your attention. A coral necklace for teething hangs from a hook. Many people believed coral protected children from sickness and bad luck, so infants proudly chew on what looks like a combination of jewellery and ancient belief. The daily routine starts with getting clean and dressed. Children reluctantly line up at the basin while nurse or you use a washcloth, soap, and the kind of soft threats that encourage at least a pretense of cooperation. Faces are scrubbed, ears checked, and hands examined for any strange residue. The older ones protest, the younger ones attempt to escape. By the time everyone is clean, you feel as though you have just finished a minor athletic competition. Historians still question whether Victorian homes truly achieved the levels of perfect cleanliness described in housekeeping guides, or if those texts were more about an ideal than daily life. Meals in the nursery are their own scheduled performance. You supervise bowls of hot cereal, eggs, toast, and perhaps fruit, if the season and budget permit. You cut food into small, manageable pieces, check for possible bones, and stop anyone from trying to use mashed potatoes as a building material. You patiently repeat the familiar rules about not talking while eating, not waving cutlery, and absolutely not feeding the dog under the table, even if his sad expression is a work of art. A small part of you cannot help but admire the dog's persistence. Once the dishes are taken away, lessons begin. If there is a designated governess, she arrives carrying books and already looking slightly tired. If not, you take on the instruction yourself, opening primers for reading and spelling. Children recite the alphabet, struggle through simple verses, and copy letters with intense concentration, their tongues sticking out. You gently guide small hands, correct slanted writing, and try to suppress a laugh at their wildly imaginative spelling of the word vegetable. Somewhere, a modern spell check program is probably whimpering. Moral education permeates every activity. Picture books do not just show cute scenes, they narrate stories about obedient children being rewarded with sweets and disobedient ones meeting unpleasant fates involving bodies of water or strangely contagious diseases. You read passages aloud from small volumes where a girl who breaks her word learns a harsh lesson, and a boy who skips school is shocked into good behaviour by a serious encounter. You try your best to lighten the tone so the children will still be able to sleep later. Yet you also understand that society expects you to raise not merely cheerful young people, but future adults who grasp the importance of responsibility, self-control, and the devastating impact of muddy footwear on clean carpets. Playtime arrives as a welcome break for everyone. The smaller children roll toy balls, build towers with blocks, and put on complex theatrical productions with dolls and tin soldiers. You observe from a chair, mending little clothes or repairing socks, trying not to eavesdrop too intently. Their games often reveal concerns and interests they cannot articulate directly. A toy soldier that keeps retreating might be silently portraying a fear of a strict schoolmaster. A doll abandoned forever in the pretend corner store might represent a child who feels unimportant. You offer gentle suggestions occasionally, steering aggressive behaviour toward kindness, trying to avoid sounding like an endless sermon. The toys themselves convey subtle messages. Construction sets promote values of hard work and development. Storybooks celebrate courage, generosity, and compliance. Even traditional games sometimes teach ethical lessons. A surprising example from this period involves games where players advance toward moral goodness and slide backward from laziness or arrogance, much like the rules of snakes and ladders, but with added spiritual significance. Children roll the dice and giggle when they fall from virtue into mischief, while you quietly think about how much of the lesson you want them to internalize. Outside, when the weather allows, you oversee their walks. Children are bundled up in multiple layers, coats fastened, hats secured, and gloves pulled on as if they are small adventurers setting off for the Arctic, rather than the local park. You push the baby carriage while the older children skip or march alongside you. Other nannies appear, each accompanying their own mobile fortress of babies, and quick conversations about teething, coughs, and whose employer is less demanding drift across the footpaths. This week, the children are either throwing rocks into a pond or attempting to climb every object that is not bolted down, and you perform a constant dance of no, that is not allowed, and yes, please be careful. Good behaviour management is a constant concern. Official guidance frequently advises firmness, consistent routines, and punishments that match the misbehaviour. Some families prefer severe reprimands and removing privileges, others believe in hitting occasionally, and some rely on elaborate systems of reward char that look like early methods of office organisation. Historians still debate whether Victorian child-rearing was mostly harsh and restrictive or simply structured and earnest by the standards of its era. You rely on intuition as much as on advice books, striving to keep the children safe without completely extinguishing their enthusiasm. It is a complex balance, especially on days when everyone seems to be possessed by spirits of mayhem. Evenings bring a calmer pace. After the final meal, you orchestrate the bedtime routine like a very tired conductor. Faces are washed once more. Small bodies are eased into nightclothes, and hair is brushed and braided to prevent terrible knots in the morning. You read stories by the glow of the fire, perhaps from the Bible, perhaps from fairy tales, or perhaps from your own gentle, carefully edited memories. You omit the most terrifying wolves and wicked stepmothers, trimming the details so their dreams are less likely to involve screaming. One by one, their eyes close. You tuck the blankets around their warm bodies, adjust pillows, and retrieve the teddy bear or cloth doll that absolutely, positively must be in the bed or the world will collapse. You pause for a moment, listening to the slow and steady sound of their breathing. In these brief moments of quiet, you fully appreciate the importance of your role. You are shaping the habits, fears, aspirations, and manners that will extend far beyond this nursery. Raising children is not just about emotional expressions. It involves 1,000 small daily decisions about cereal, picture books, scolding, and comforting hugs. You ease the door shut, step back into the hall and feel your shoulders relax, already certain that tomorrow the tiny domain behind that door will wake up again, clamorous and requiring attention, and that you will return anyway because that is your job. You settle at a small desk with 2 stacks arranged before you. One holds statements that gnaw at your peace of mind. The second contains invitations and notices that promise to gnaw at your spare moments. You pick up a rigid little card decorated with elegant script announcing a gathering for the Ladies' District Visiting Society. It seems agreeable until you recall how much walking the commitment usually entails. On another piece of paper, you read about a sewing circle for the needy scheduled for Thursday afternoon, followed by a committee meeting for the church bazaar. Respectable society definitely discourages women from being inactive, especially women who seem to have available hours. So, the perfect strategy emerges. You fill your calendar with charity work. It appears virtuous, feels productive, and conveniently signals to everyone that you are certainly not sitting at home eating cake in your petticoats. You reach for a small ledger where you track all these engagements. Names of groups, meeting times, lists of promised garments and collected funds tumble across the pages in careful script. A known historical truth interjects here that 19th century Britain experiences an immense rise in charitable organisations and volunteer groups, many relying heavily on women for management, fundraising and manual effort. Your notebook may be minor, but it fits into that much larger system. Sunday mornings bring everything into sharp focus. You dress deliberately, selecting clothing that appears subdued but not worn, modest but not uninteresting. The walk to the church feels almost like joining a formal procession, familiar faces emerging from cross streets, all heading toward the same bell tower or spire. Inside, polished wooden benches stretch in long lines, the atmosphere scented with damp wool, beeswax, and residual incense or coal smoke, depending on the specific faith. You slide into your family's bench, the location silently held by custom and payment of dues. Around you, other women settle with soft rustles of skirts and hymn book pages. Children fidget, men clear their throats. Someone near the back tries to suppress a cough. You follow the liturgy, rising, kneeling, sitting at the specified points, lips moving to familiar songs. Historians still question whether attending church regularly is truly devout for most people, or mainly a social requirement that everyone accepts to avoid inconvenient questions. You experience a blend of genuine belief and habit. Resting in the same wooden spot during the sermon, your gaze drifts around the sanctuary. Memorial plaques on the walls commemorate generous donations, usually in memory of someone exceptionally upstanding and conveniently wealthy. You recognise that the same families feature prominently on donor lists for the parish school, the soup kitchen, or the clothing society. Their wives and daughters often occupy these benches, considering more than theology. They mentally calculate how many tickets must be sold for the next fundraising tea and which lady can be trusted to run a booth without reserving all the best goods for her circle. After the service concludes, the churchyard functions as a social hub. People gather in small groups, exchanging pleasantries, gossip and plans. You find yourself listening to a clergyman detailing the needs of a struggling family on a nearby street. Mother is unwell, father is unemployed, children are running around in shoes that barely qualify as footwear. As he speaks, you start making arrangements for a visit, wondering whether you have sufficient spare blankets and if you can persuade your friends to donate more. You nod thoughtfully, but a tiny corner of your mind inserts a humorous thought about how you are steadily becoming a walking combination of social worker and closet organizer. A few days later, You stand at the entrance of a confined dwelling with a basket resting on your arm. Inside are essential foodstuffs, some warmer garments, perhaps a child's simple dress you helped stitch at a sewing bee. The scent of the impoverished home reaches you first, a heavy combination of dampness, overcrowding, and the faint acidity of too many people in too little area. You tap gently, then step in when asked, careful to offer a smile without seeming to stare. You speak with the woman of the house, inquiring about her health, the children's studies, her husband's search for employment. There is sincere empathy in your inquiries. There is also an unspoken appraisal. Are they industrious or careless, unlucky or irresponsible, victims of circumstance or architects of their own misfortune? The differentiation matters to your community because charity is meant to foster virtue as well as alleviate suffering. It is a profound judgment to make while steadying a basket and attempting not to bump your hat on the low entrance frame. Later, you sit in a friend's sitting room for a needlework gathering. A long table supports cloth, needles, pins, and shears. You take your seat among a line of women, all focused on items that will eventually dress the poor or raise money at a fundraiser. The task is repetitive, but the conversation prevents it from feeling endless. Gossip about engagements, sicknesses, and disastrous recipes, intertwined with discussions of missionary reports and the latest call for blankets. Someone reads aloud from a printed pamphlet about a mission school in a far-flung part of the empire. The children there require clothes, Bibles, and instruction. The text emphasizes in the intense tone of people who have never dealt with a resistant 5-year-old at bedtime. A curious detail appears when you observe a small wooden container shaped like a miniature house on the side table. It is a missionary collection box, complete with a tiny slot where coins deposited during afternoon tea sessions accumulate into larger totals. The box may be decorated with painted palm trees and small smiling figures. They likely resemble nothing like the actual people your money will eventually assist. Bazaars represent the exciting aspect of all this respectable activity. Weeks of planning precede a day when a hall or schoolroom transforms into a marketplace of booths, each managed by women who have spent evenings bent over craft projects. You help arrange goods on a surface, everything from crocheted baby attire to stitched bookmarks and jars of preserve. There might even be a novelty stall where local gentlemen offer their skills for a charge, sketching funny portraits or composing amusing poems on demand. You try not to smile too widely when you recall that some attendees come more for the mild flirtation and dessert than for the sermon about philanthropic duty at the event's opening. Temperance societies and mothers' groups provide yet another channel for your energy. You attend a session where sincere women discuss the hazards of alcohol, the plight of wives burdened by drunken husbands, and the necessity for pledges. Booklets stack up on the table, printed with warnings and strikingly gloomy illustrations. You might add your signature to a pledge card or assist in organising a talk. Historians continue to debate whether these movements primarily empower women by granting them a public platform, or restrict them by concentrating all their activism on fixing men's habits instead of changing fundamental systems. Sitting in the room, you feel both possibilities tugging at the edge of your conscience. By the time you walk homeward at twilight, your pace feels slower. The day has been packed with worthwhile deeds. Church services, sewing committee notes quickly recorded in your little book, all piled on top of the usual demands of home. You feel weary, but also strangely fulfilled. Society may inform you that your rightful place is the private domain. Yet through this respectable busy schedule you venture into streets, rooms and lives far beyond your own front door. The labour is unpaid, naturally, but it leaves evidence in improved circumstances, fuller stomachs, warmer shoulders and small flickers of hope where none existed before. You hang up your outer garment, loosen your shoelaces, and consider, just for a moment, what you might achieve if all this organising ever shifted from charity to something even more ambitious. You sit down in the stillness that arrives when the house finally ceases needing your attention. Every 30 seconds the coal fire settles with quiet sounds. The clock ticks in steady little rhythms, and a circle of lamplight opens on the table like a private sanctuary. On that sanctuary rests your escape route, a pile of volumes and a piece of music with your name inscribed at the top. For once, nothing demands anything, except perhaps that you turn the sheet without dropping tea on it. You reach first for a book. The covering is cloth, slightly worn at the corners from being opened in too many rushed moments between chores. Inside, tiny print travels down the page in long, confident paragraphs. The Victorian novel does not apologise for being lengthy, wordy. If it had a temperament, it would absolutely insist on detailing what everyone ate for breakfast and how they felt about it. A known historical fact passes behind your eyes. By the mid-19th century, inexpensive printing and increased literacy mean that vast numbers of women read consistently, borrowing novels from lending libraries or purchasing serialized stories in magazines. Narratives penetrate sitting rooms, sleeping quarters, and boarding houses, quietly altering how people view the world. You gently pull the bookmark free, a small length of ribbon slightly scorched at one end, because real life never respects literature, and sink into the narrative. The room around you disappears. You travel into crowded London alleys, wind-swept moors, or sitting rooms much grander and more confusing than your own. You enjoy the noble protagonists and brave female leads, yes, but you also pay quiet attention to the clumsy sisters, the overwhelmed aunts, the stubborn young women who are a little too sharp for their own good. Somehow they feel closer to the person you see in the mirror each morning. Reading is not always regarded as simple leisure. Books warn that too many novels can overstimulate a sensitive female mind, which is quite insulting and also faintly enticing. You imagine your brain wearing a tiny party hat every time a plot twist occurs. Historians still debate whether Victorian women primarily used these books to solidify the principles they were already taught, or to test out new ways of thinking about affection, obligation, and self-reliance. You suspect both are accurate, depending on the evening and the mood and whether the heroine marries the man you selected for her. On page 30, when your eyes feel tired, you close the book and look toward the piano. The instrument occupies prime space in the room, a long, gleaming shape with its own presence. The lid reflects the lamplight, keys waiting like neat little teeth for your touch. A curious detail surfaces when you recall the strange inventions some households used to manage this elegant beast. Keyboard covers that lock to prevent curious children from banging, or subtle felt strips tucked between the strings to soften the sound for sensitive neighbours. Music matters so greatly that people will literally mute it rather than exist without it. You sit on the seat and adjust the height, smoothing your skirt so it hangs correctly. Your posture straightens almost instinctively. Every music tutor in the country seems to agree that slouching leads directly to moral decay and incorrect notes. You open a collection of sheet music, pages filled with dances, sentimental tunes, and perhaps an ambitious sonata that you promise yourself you will master eventually. Your fingers pause over the keys, then drop into a chord, the sound expanding out into the room. Playing is supposed to be one of those feminine talents that prove you are cultivated, refined, disciplined, and suitable for society. Yet from this position at the keyboard, it feels more like a private conversation. You transition from bright, lively pieces to something darker and slower, letting the notes express things you cannot easily put into language. At the breakfast table, a cheerful demeanour covers for a restless spirit. A sombre nocturne allows you to indulge sadness without anyone inquiring if you are upset. If someone enters while you are deep in a particularly dramatic passage, you casually pretend you are merely practicing, not expressing your entire emotional history through a complicated left-hand section. Sometimes you perform for a small, familiar audience. Family gathers in a loose grouping, someone turning pages for you, someone else humming along slightly off-key. You feel their focus like gentle warmth on your skin. Minor errors become part of the moment rather than catastrophes. Other times, guests sit formally on upholstered chairs and you are showcased as part of the evening's entertainment. Somewhere between the first course and the social news, you smile, play, and pretend your heart is not racing for reasons that have nothing to do with musical tempo. When you finally close the lid, another form of stillness emerges. You move back to the desk and pull a small plain volume toward you. Your diary. Its exterior is not as decorative as the novels, but its contents feel far more charged. You dip your writing instrument in ink, tap off the extra, and pause. There is a private satisfaction in knowing that these pages belong only to you, at least in theory. You record the day in neat handwriting, noting what occurred, how people behaved, and what you considered but left unsaid. Some entries are concise: weather, chores, social calls. Others expand into paragraphs on frustration, happiness, or that exchange someone had the nerve to interrupt just when it was getting intriguing. You mention books read, music played, sermons heard, and children's questions that surprised you with their candour. Occasionally you admit things you would never dare to confide in even a close friend. The worry that you are not meeting expectations, the sudden urge to run away to sea, the frustrating attraction to someone completely inappropriate. The diary absorbs it all without judgment, although your future self will certainly raise an eyebrow at some of these outbursts. You know diaries can be risky as well as comforting. If another person reads them, your private thoughts become evidence. Women sometimes secure these notebooks with a lock or conceal them behind rows of boring-looking books. A few even write in a personal shorthand so that anyone prying will require both time and imagination to decipher their secrets. Historians still debate whether these journals should be interpreted today mainly as honest reflections of inner life or performances shaped by what the writer thinks a future reader might see. As you scratch ink onto paper by lamplight, you mostly write for the version of yourself who will need companionship on some distant winter night. Not all private worlds spill into organised books. Some hide in sketch pads where you copy drawings of artwork you have never seen in person or doodle funny portraits of relatives that would definitely start a conflict if circulated. Others exist in collections: pressed blossoms, theatre brochures, dried seaweed carefully arranged on paper and labelled in tiny letters. You pin experiences to pages like insects, preserving proof that your existence involves more than housework and polite conversation. As darkness closes in closer at the window, you feel the edges of fatigue blur your thoughts. You shut the diary, stacking it beneath the novel as if the two are compatible neighbours. Between them and the piano, you possess a set of keys to inner spaces nobody else can entirely enter. The world outside might perceive your days as typical, predictable, even restricted. Sitting here in the lamplight, with stories, music, and ink stains on your fingers, you know the truth. There are bustling cities inside your mind, rough seas in your heart, and entire arguments running silently where nobody can interrupt. You adjust the lamp, listen to the fading echo of your own last chord in the air, and let the stillness settle around those secret inner worlds like a warm, dark wrapping. You straighten your bonnet in the mirror and remind yourself that falling in love in this era is essentially like sitting for an examination where no one will admit what the questions are. There are rules, countless rules, but everyone pretends they are simply common sense. Appear too keen and you are desperate. Appear too reserved and you are cold. At least your bangs look manageable today. That is something. It often begins in the most respectable settings. Church, a friend's drawing room, a strictly supervised outing in a public area that features more guardians than trees. You sit with your hands folded just so, gaze modest but not fixed on the floor, ears alert for the sound of a specific pair of shoes. If you are from a middle or upper-class background, no well-bred young woman travels about with young men alone. You are always part of a group. You arrive with an older companion, sit in a cluster, and depart with someone older, watching like a bird of prey in a bonnet. Dances are where things become more exciting. In a gas-lit ballroom or a simple meeting space above a business, musicians take their positions. Skirts twirl and courtship suddenly has a melody. The dance card hanging from your wrist lists each dance, and gentlemen are required to write their names next to the waltz or quadrille they hope to secure. A clear historical fact glides gracefully across the floor here. Throughout the 19th century, supervised dances across Britain and Europe served as vital places for finding suitable partners, with guides explaining exactly how many times a lady should dance with the same man without causing gossip. You manage your card like a strategist, careful not to give too much attention to anyone whose company you privately find as interesting as the surrounding walls. Flirtation happens in tiny, subtle gestures, a look held a moment too long, a fan opened or closed in a certain sequence, fingers brushing very lightly as a glove is returned. You are not expected to state your feelings openly. You are expected to convey them in code. Some girls adopt the language of flowers, where a crimson rosebud whispers one thing, a yellow carnation, something completely different. You imagine modern romance with this system and reluctantly concede that breaking up by flower arrangement would at least look lovely. Letters step in when meetings are infrequent, with parental consent, of course. Ink and paper carry all the emotions you cannot safely utter aloud. You write cautiously, letting warmth penetrate, phrases that still sound proper. You discuss books, sermons, the climate, that concert, anything neutral enough to prevent scandal but personal enough to hint that this person occupies significant space in your thoughts. Sealing the envelope feels strangely thrilling, like tucking a piece of your heart into a very well-behaved container. Families scrutinize every suitor with terrifying intensity. Wealth, connections, manners, moral reputation all undergo examination. If you are honest, you know that some of this is practical. In a world without many acceptable careers for women, marriage often determines whether you will live comfortably or in constant worry. Historians still argue whether dating customs mainly shielded women in an unpredictable world, or mainly restricted them so tightly that true choice became an illusion. Sitting in your best attire while older relatives casually mention a gentleman's bank account, you perceive how much of your future is being discussed without your direct participation. Engagement transforms everything from possibility into concrete plan. When a proposal arrives, it might be arranged privately between you and the man, then presented to the families. Or it might occur only after careful negotiations with your parents already mostly committed before you have entirely finished deciding how you feel. At the moment of saying yes, however, you probably feel something sharp and bright, whether it is love, relief, or a complex combination of both. A ring appears, usually made of gold, sometimes set with small stones, a clear symbol that subtly alters how everyone greets you. Announcements follow. Family letters carry the news outward like ripples on water. Local newspapers print small notices recording your name, his name, and the aspects of the union considered most impressive. Readers scan these updates the way people now check social media, eyes lingering on names that inspire jealousy, interest, or a quick, unkind scoff. A curious detail rests in the custom some girls treasure of sleeping with a piece of wedding cake under their pillow, so they will dream of their future husband. With your luck, you suspect you would merely dream of aunts. Wedding preparations then consume your days like a very determined relative. Clothes for you, clothes for the bridesmaids, clothes for family members who insist they have nothing suitable to wear despite owning 3 closets. The gown itself is not always pure white in the modern sense. Many brides wear the best colour they can afford, something that can later be worn for formal events. White becomes more popular after a certain queen selects it, but plenty of practical women quietly disregard the fashion for a dress that survives more than one outing. The ceremony unites social display and legal contract. You stand at the front of a church or official office, hands shaking inside gloves, voice quiet when you repeat vows about affection, respect, and obedience. A significant historical fact weighs on your shoulder, reminding you that under English common law for much of this century, a married woman's legal status merges into her husband's through the concept of coverture, meaning he controls property and income in most cases. Until reforms later in the century weaken these rules, you say, "I do," and in the eyes of the law you become both valued and somewhat invisible. A reception follows, with dessert, speeches, and relatives dispensing unrequested advice. Some traditions are serious, like cutting the cake together or receiving lines of guests who wish you well. Others are wonderfully peculiar. In some areas, people snip off tiny pieces of the bride's veil as lucky mementos, which must make her feel like a very polite shrub under assault. Hair from the bride and groom might be intertwined and placed in a pin, a small, slightly unsettling symbol of union that will sit in a drawer for decades. You smile, nod, and endure the endless stream of congratulations until your facial muscles feel too rigid to move. Then the public portion ends. Doors close. The honeymoon or wedding night begins, depending on your situation. It is here that Victorian reticence does its strangest work. Before marriage, very few respectable girls receive explicit details about the physical realities of what awaits. Mothers often avoid the topic. Physicians are vague. Books talk of obligation and wifely submission rather than physical intimacy. You find yourself in a room with someone you may deeply care for, and very little idea how to handle the reality behind all those lowered eyes and polite terms. Some pairs approach the night tenderly, sharing laughter, learning gradually, transforming awkwardness into closeness over time. Others struggle with fear, revulsion, pain, or a sense of duty that overwhelms desire. Historians still debate whether the typical Victorian marital bedroom is mostly loving and harmonious, or mostly constrained and anxious. The truth likely hides behind too many closed curtains and cautious diaries to be neatly resolved. You only know your own experience, and that is shaped by personality, health, and how safe you feel expressing no as well as yes. In some households, separate beds or even separate rooms become standard practice. After the first children arrive, respectful reasons are offered: health, rest, the husband's need to get up early for work, the wife's delicate constitution. Beneath those explanations lie all kinds of stories. Some couples genuinely appreciate the comfort of occasional space. Others use separate rooms as a shield against expectations they find intolerable. A visiting relative might never guess which is which as they pass a row of identical polished doors. By daylight, marriage evolves into something more practical and shared. You manage a home together, present a unified image to the world, and host relatives who will take careful mental notes about how cheerful you appear. Courtship's small coded signals now yield to larger compromises about finances, children, domestic help, visits, and whether that picture in the hallway is truly as attractive as your husband insists. You exchange dreams for daily practices, and somewhere inside all of that, you try to keep alive the spark of warmth that began with a look across a crowded space or a line of neat handwriting at the bottom of a note. You wake up and immediately realize something is wrong. The room sways a little too much when you turn your head, and there is a dull, throbbing pressure behind your eyes. Your arms and legs feel as though someone has silently substituted them with sacks of flour. During the night, somewhere below, the household starts another ordinary day. Up here, your body has announced that it will not be following the schedule. You prop yourself upright in bed, and the light from the window stabs your eyes for a moment. Your vision blurs at the edges and a wave of dizziness washes over you. You grip the bed frame and breathe slowly, feeling your heart flutter like a captive bird. People enjoy making jokes about women fainting gracefully, but right now it feels less like romance and more like a very inconvenient threat to your breakfast. On the bedside table sits a familiar small bottle of smelling salts. You remove the stopper and the sharp ammonia odour jolts your nostrils awake. Eyes tear up, chest tightens, but the light-headedness subsides a little. These salts are found in handbags, small purses, and even tiny pendant lockets, ready for the moment when someone feels faint in church or a crowded parlour. It is a curious detail that some containers are so ornate that they look like ornaments rather than medical supplies, tiny silver or enamelled cases hiding a brutally practical scent. You settle back against pillows and look around the space. Heavy draperies block the worst of the daylight, but a thin strip of sun still creeps through, tracing a bright line on the carpet. On one side stands the fainting couch, that long, sloping piece of furniture, half bed and half sofa. People joke about women collapsing dramatically onto it for show. You know it's also the sole spot you can stretch out fully clothed when your corset feels too snug and your breath won't cooperate. Sickness for women in this time often came dressed up in pretty words. Nervous exhaustion, vapours, female complaints, all sound delicate and mysterious, yet completely fail to explain why. Your low back aches, your head throbs, and your period feels like someone is twisting you like a washcloth. A simple fact from history settles next to your pillow, confirming as much. 19th century British medicine remains male-dominated, with women only gradually entering medical schools in later decades and encountering massive opposition when they do. Many male doctors speak confidently about the female body while refusing to let women train as equals. A tap sounds, and the door opens. A maid brings a tray with weak tea and plain toast, the standard cure for anything from a mild headache to an emotional crisis. She asks if you want to send for the doctor. You pause. Doctors cost money, carry social weight, and sometimes confuse you more than when they arrived. For sharp pain or a fever, you say yes. For the unending heavy fatigue that everyone labels nerves, you are less certain. Historians still debate whether many of these issues stem mainly from physical ailments like low iron, infections, and poor nutrition, or from the crushing weight of restricted lives and endless duties. Your body doesn't particularly care which side wins the argument. It only wants peace. Eventually you agree to have the doctor come. Hours dissolve in a blur of light sleep and tepid tea. When he appears, little black bag in hand, he smells faintly of pipe tobacco and clean disinfectant. He asks questions, some reasonable, some deeply embarrassing, delivered in a tone that suggests you should feel ashamed. You describe the aches, the spinning head, the way your heart races at night when you lie awake, worrying over everything and nothing. He listens, frowns, and jots a few words in a notepad that you try and fail to read upside down. The diagnosis can feel random. It might be simple weariness, a chill, weak nerves, or that frighteningly elastic word, hysteria. The term connects directly to the Greek word for womb and gets applied with depressing zeal to almost any mental or emotional symptom in women. Too down, too worried, too mad, too outspoken, and a person in charge might decide your womb is staging a revolt. Treatments range from the benign, rest, fresh air, to the intrusive, strange attempts at electric shock therapy or cutting into the body. You hold onto the hope that your specific doctor prefers the tea and rest approach rather than the scalpel and machine crowd. Today he prescribes rest and a change of scenery, maybe a few weeks by the ocean or in the countryside where bracing winds and easy walks are supposed to heal souls as well as lungs. For wealthy women, this might mean stays at health resorts with bathing machines that politely push patients into the waves. Or trips to mineral springs where everyone waits in line to drink foul-tasting water that claims to fix everything. For those without the means, a change of air could mean a short visit to relatives on a less smoky street, which is better than nothing and cheaper than being cured by trendy ocean currents. Some doctors promote the rest cure in a stricter form. You might be confined to bed for weeks, forbidden from reading, writing, or even talking much, fed rich food, and expected to lie motionless until your nerves heal. Historians still argue whether this strict plan truly helps cases of severe depression or makes them worse by taking away the few activities that give women pleasure and distraction. You imagine being told to give up books and music for months and feel your spirit protest loudly enough to be considered its own medical problem. While serious sicknesses like consumption, cholera, or infections after childbirth sweep through the population, much suffering never gets a headline name. Non-stop pregnancies wear bodies out. Miscarriages happen quietly out of sight and are often treated as sad but unsurprising. Women care for sick family members, sit through long nights beside beds and catch every cold that passes through the nursery. The flu, chest infections, joint pain, they all land on shoulders that are already carrying more than their fair share. Your own discomfort blends into this larger picture of quiet, unacknowledged burden. Homemade remedies line the shelves and drawers. Bottles of laudanum, an opium tincture mixed with alcohol, offer relief from pain and sleeplessness but risk addiction, especially when recommended freely for everything from menstrual pain to sorrow. Calming syrups for children contain similar ingredients, promising mothers peace at the cost of dulling a child's senses. Herbal brews made from chamomile, peppermint or raspberry leaves feel gentler, their help lying somewhere between actual medicine and the comfort of a warm mug held between cold hands. Sickness affects the household as much as it affects your body. When you are stuck in bed, someone else handles tasks you usually do without thinking. Bills, letters, 100 small decisions about meals and mending. You may feel guilty watching others hurry about while you lie under blankets, yet for once the world doesn't fall apart simply because you aren't on your feet. A small rebellious idea drifts across your mind. Maybe you deserve rest not only with a doctor's slip, but as a normal part of life. Visitors come, some bringing flowers, some bringing news, all bringing judgments they may not mean to show. One friend quietly says she sometimes pretends to have a slight headache just to escape to a quiet room. Another arrives with leaflets about a new health trend: cold water dunking, electricity treatments, vegetable-only diets, spiritual healing. Strange practices multiply in response to needs that traditional medicine does not fully address. From mesmerism sessions where patients sit in dark rooms expecting magnetic forces to ease their minds to complex diets based on the belief that meat, sugar, or spices are slowly wrecking society. As days pass, your strength returns slowly. You sit up for longer, walk a little way across the room, perhaps venture as far as the window. Outside, life goes on. Kids yell in the street. Carts rumble past, fog creeps in around the rooftops. Inside, the fainting couch waits. The smelling salts stay on the table. The doctor's advice echoes in your ears. You realize that illness in this world is never only a physical thing. It's a debate between your nerves, your responsibilities, your society, and your own silent wish for a life that doesn't require collapsing to grant you a break. You sit at the parlour table, staring at a pamphlet that looks far too small to be causing this much trouble. The paper is thin, the ink slightly smeared, but the title is not shy at all. It talks about women's rights and that forbidden political goal, the vote. You look toward the door as if the words might jump off the page and shock the coat rack. You've always been told your power lies in private places, home, family, charity. You cook, you repair, you comfort, you advise. But lately, conversations in certain sitting rooms sound different. Friends bring newspapers folded just so, with articles about new laws and factory conditions. You pour tea and feel a growing irritation that these decisions made by men in far-off rooms reach into every corner of your day, from food costs to school rules, and you have absolutely no direct voice in them. Someone invites you to a small gathering, nothing dramatic, nothing public, just a quiet meeting in a sitting room with extra chairs squeezed in and a polite note delivered by hand. You arrive to find women of different ages, some in severe dark dresses, some in softer styles, all sitting a little straighter than normal. There is a silence that feels part nervousness, part excitement, the same feeling you get just before a thunderstorm when the air is too still. A woman at the front, smart-eyed and very determined, stands to speak. She talks about laws that treat married women as legal children, about wages that disappear into husbands' wallets, about the way local councils and parliament shape schools, streets and work while half the people only watch from the sidelines. A simple fact from history lands in your lap as she explains that by the later 19th century some women in Britain can already vote in certain local elections if they own or rent property in their own names. Yet national parliamentary elections remain firmly out of reach. The system, you realise, already has exceptions, tiny openings where light can sneak in. You listen, heart beating faster as she describes petitions that have been sent to lawmakers, signatures gathered with tired hands and lots of doorbell ringing. Some campaigns stay strictly courteous, the tone respectful and steady, trusting that logic and persistence will eventually win. Others grow impatient and start talking about protests, parades, even breaking the law peacefully. Historians still argue whether gentle persuasion or more aggressive actions do more to change public opinion. Sitting in your chair, palms damp against your skirt, you can see the appeal and the danger in both strategies. After the speech, a tray of pamphlets passes around the room. You take one, then another, until you are holding enough reading to keep your mind busy for weeks. The pages are full of arguments, data, and carefully chosen examples of women managing money, businesses, even large estates, all while being told they are too delicate to understand a ballot paper. One article highlights the absurdity that a law can send a woman to jail, yet she has no voice in choosing the men who write those laws. You feel a small, fierce laugh rise in your throat at the sheer lack of sense. Not every activist works in drawing rooms. You find yourself on another day in a public hall that smells of damp coats and fresh ideas. Rows of chairs fill with women and a few men, some supportive, some clearly dragged along. Banners hang overhead, stitched by hands that usually decorate pillowcases. The slogans are short, sharp, and entirely uninterested in staying quietly at home. Speakers rise one after another. A teacher describes girls who study hard in school, only to find that adult life offers them a choice between poorly paid work and marriage with no financial control. A factory worker talks about long hours and unsafe machinery, her voice steady as she argues that people who suffer the worst conditions deserve to help set the rules. A suffrage organiser outlines plans for signature drives and demonstrations. You can feel the temperature in the room rise, not from any heater, but from the number of people who have finally had enough. Outside, the movement spills onto the streets. You join a procession one afternoon, heart thudding as you step into line. Women march in coordinated colours, skirts swaying, sashes bright against dark coats. Signs rise above the crowd, letters large enough to shout without making a sound. Bystanders line the sidewalks, some clapping, some heckling, some staring as though the world has suddenly flipped upside down. A child giggles at the sight of respectable ladies chanting, and you fight the urge to wink at him just to make his day. Even stranger, printed material multiplies. You help fold newsletters fresh off the press, set headlines, or address envelopes until your hand aches. A curious detail slips through your fingers in the form of suffrage merchandise. Buttons, ribbons, even tea sets appear decorated with slogans or movement colours. One group orders fine china, whose pattern hides words about votes for women among the flowers, a quiet act of defiance that lets you sip your tea from a tiny porcelain protest. Not everyone approves. Relatives wrinkle their noses and warn that politics will make you unladylike, unlovable, or simply worn out. Newspapers publish cartoons of suffrage supporters as loud, unpleasant shrews who ignore their children and burn dinner. You roll your eyes, imagining all the careful housework you could still complete after a quick stop at the polling place. The idea that casting one vote would instantly ruin an omelette seems like a mistake in science worth investigating. Some activists take bolder action, chaining themselves to fences, interrupting meetings, or refusing to pay taxes they consider unjust. arrests follow, and prison cells hold women whose biggest crime is refusing to stay politely silent. When hunger strikes begin, authorities respond with force-feeding, a practice as cruel as it sounds. Later laws appear that permit temporary release of weakened prisoners, only to re-arrest them once they recover, a policy nicknamed after a cat playing with captured mice. Historians still argue whether such harsh reactions hurt the movement by scaring supporters or helped it by showing the opposition's cruelty. You may not choose aggressive tactics yourself, yet you feel their effect. Newspapers can no longer ignore the issue. Dinner table conversations turn toward it, whether people like it or not. Jokes about women wanting votes start to sound a little tired, as if the joke tellers suspect the laughter might not last forever. Even those who oppose change feel forced to explain why, and explanations have a way of sounding weaker than slogans when repeated too often. Letters, petitions, meetings, parades, fundraising teas all become part of your daily life. You still manage a household, raise children, visit the sick, and keep up the usual round of social calls and sewing. But now, tucked into your small handbag, alongside the handkerchief and tiny mirror, there might be a folded leaflet, a subscription list, or a badge ready to be pinned on when you reach the right doorway. Your days grow more packed, yet also somehow bigger, as if the map of your life now includes the council chamber and the parliamentary bench, even if you never step foot inside either. At night, when the house quiets, you sit with a pamphlet in one hand and a cup of cocoa in the other, reading arguments printed in dense lines of type. You imagine a future where a woman signs her own property papers, keeps her earnings, votes in elections, and serves on local boards without causing a fuss. Historians in that future will almost certainly argue about how fast the change really happened and who deserves the most praise. You smile at the thought that somewhere in the notes, hidden behind important names and famous speeches, there will be a trace of all the ordinary days when you walked to meetings, folded leaflets, and dared to believe that your time and energy mattered to something bigger than your own front door. Evening settles over the town like a heavy velvet curtain. Outside, the last smear of daylight fades from the sky while a thin mist curls between chimneys. You stand by the window a moment, feeling the glass cool under your fingers. The street below begins its nightly shift. A lamplighter appears at the corner, long pole in hand, moving from post to post with patient steps. One by one, glass globes of gas flare into life, turning the gloom into a patchwork of soft golden pools and shadow. Inside, the house responds with its own light. Someone turns the valve on the wall bracket and the gas hisses, then blooms into a pale flame. You strike a match, lift it carefully, and watch the mantle light up. Shadows jump backward across the ceiling, then settle into their usual corners. A simple historical fact flickers in your mind, that in many British cities gaslighting spread during the 19th century, replacing dim oil lamps and candles in streets and wealthier homes. Evening no longer means darkness by default. It means work and social time stretched further into the hours that used to belong only to sleep. Curtains are drawn, blocking out the fog and any prying eyes. The fire in the grate crackles, throwing up occasional sparks that hit the guard. You move through the room, adjusting lamps, trimming wicks where candles still burn, checking that none are too close to drapes or dried flowers. The boundary between cosy and disaster feels very thin when half your light involves open flames. You breathe in the mixed scent of coal, warmed dust, and the faint chemical smell from the gas jets, a scent that clings quietly to fabrics and hair. Evening is when the scattered members of the household come together. Someone picks up a newspaper, rustling it into quietness, while another reaches for a basket of mending. Children sit crisscross applesauce on the rug with picture books or simple games, voices soft and slightly sleepy. You thread a needle and settle into your own small task, perhaps fixing a sock heel or adding new lace to a collar. Your hands keep moving while your ears absorb every scrap of conversation, Reports from the city council, news of distant conflicts, gossip about inventors and explorers. Everything funnels through the printed page to this modest circle around the fire. The world outside feels both far away and worryingly near. Telegraph lines connect the country. Trains carry letters and people faster than any previous generation could have imagined. And new machines appear in advertisements almost weekly. You read notices about telephones being tested in certain areas, about electric light demonstrations so bright they make gas look old-fashioned overnight. Historians still argue whether most Victorian women welcome such changes with enthusiasm, indifference, or quiet concern about how each new invention will alter the rhythm of their days. You only know that when you look at the glowing gas mantles, you can almost feel time leaning forward towards some future where a different kind of light hums in the ceiling. Occasionally the evening holds a special pleasure. A friend arrives with a folded bundle of music, and the parlour becomes a makeshift concert hall, voices weaving between piano notes. Another night, someone borrows a magic lantern and you help darken the room while children clutch cushions in anticipation. Slides glow on a white sheet showing far-off places, funny scenes, or Bible stories, the images jerking slightly as the operator moves the mechanism. As a curious detail, you notice how often the slides go blurry when the person at the lamp laughs at their own favourite picture, just enough to turn a grand ruin into a very dignified smear of light. It's awkward by today's standards, yet captivating in the moment. When guests visit, gaslit evenings become more formal. Candles multiply on the mantelpiece, glass shades polished to throw extra sparkle. You offer tea, perhaps something stronger if the household approves, and keep conversation flowing as steadily as the flame above your head. Stories of the day's work, charity efforts, small victories, and frustrations are all laid out like food on a buffet. You watch faces in the warm glow, noticing how the light softens some features and sharpens others, how it stays kindly on one person and unfairly highlights another's age. Later, when the front door finally closes for the last time and the house sighs, the routine shifts again. You walk from room to room, checking window latches, door bolts, the level of coal in each grate. Lamps are turned down or extinguished completely, hissing softly as the gas thins and vanishes. Candles are snuffed, leaving curling threads of smoke that smell faintly sweet. The hallway grows dimmer with every step, the circle of light from your hand lamp shrinking until the rest of the house feels more like a blueprint than a solid place. In your bedroom, the silence feels almost loud. Outside, the street lamps burn on, halos shimmering in fog, their glow slipping around the edges of your curtains. You loosen laces, unfasten buttons, and feel your body slowly relax from its daytime form. The bed, with its familiar dip in the mattress and the whisper of sheets, waits like a promise. You slip between covers and lie still, listening. Somewhere a cart rattles over late cobblestones. Somewhere a clock strikes the hour. Somewhere a policeman's steps pass in even beats. Your mind drifts as your muscles soften. You think about the women you saw and heard today, in kitchens, factories, parlours, halls, office clerks typing keys in late afternoon light, seamstresses bending under gas jets in workrooms, campaigners folding leaflets at wooden tables, mothers calming fussy children with stories and songs. The age likes to pretend that these lives are fixed, that each woman is rooted exactly where tradition placed her. Yet in this dimly lit pause before sleep, it's hard to ignore the sense that everything is very slowly changing. New schools open their doors to girls. New jobs hover at the edge of possibility. New ideas about rights and responsibilities seep into the most carefully decorated rooms. You close your eyes and picture some future evening in the same city. Street lamps burning with electric current, not gas. Trams humming along rails. Women striding home from offices and colleges with books under their arms and ink still drying on papers that carry their own signatures. Children reading stories written by names that in your time have not yet learned to hold a pen. The world outside your window is not there yet, but the faint, steady glow of the lamp above your bed feels like a small, persistent reminder that change often begins in quiet places, carried by people who simply refuse to sit in the dark. The lights in that world drift further away now, like tiny boats of light sailing off down a slow, dark river. You stay where you are, comfortably on the bank, feeling how soft the grass has become under your feet, how gently the air moves around you. The cobblestones you walked earlier smooth themselves out into something kinder, more like warm sand or a favourite old carpet. Every step you took through gaslit streets and crowded rooms loosens in your memory, turning from effort into a lazy trail that simply curls back toward rest. You notice how heavy your eyelids feel, the way they want to settle and stay settled. Each breath deepens without you forcing it, like a tide that has finally decided to stop arguing with the moon. As you breathe out, you let go of the tension in your shoulders, the small frown lines between your brows, the way your hands sometimes clench without asking your permission. They uncurl now, calm and unbothered, as if they have laid down every broom, ledger, needle and pen they ever held around you. The last echoes of Victorian noise fade. No hoofbeats, no iron wheels, no clatter of teacups. Even the ticking clock grows softer, its sound stretching out between each beat until it becomes something like distant waves or the gentle hum of a train far away, carrying other people to other places while you are allowed to stay right here. The houses you visited today fold themselves up like paper toys and slide neatly onto a shelf in your mind, waiting patiently until you feel like taking them down again. You lie there, safe in your own quiet room with the faintest glow left, just enough to trace a comfortable outline around the bed, the pillow, the space where your thoughts are slowly untangling. You do not have to fix anything, decide anything, or impress anyone. For tonight, the story belongs entirely to rest. If a fragment of gaslight lingers behind your eyes, let it shrink to a tiny, steady point and then gently go out, leaving only the softness that follows.